As I recall, exactly 2 years ago, that was the first starting point when Ukraine's forum was initiated, and I had the honor to be here as well. So I think with this panel, we'll try to a bit set the stage, so to say, the background of what is happening, not only in Ukraine, but what is happening geopolitically and geostrategically in the region and wider in the world. I hope that in this whole we all agree that current Russian behavior is posing really an existential threat not only to countries like Ukraine or Georgia or Moldova, but it does pose such a threat to the European Union, to NATO countries, and that means that the order that Europe has built over the 70 years is under threat today. I think that after 2008, and especially since 2014, we clearly understand that Russia is not prone to work within win-win strategies and a win-win world. And it sees the West as a clear adversary and not a friend. And it's not because the West has done something wrong. It's just the way the world makes sense to Russia when it sees the West as an enemy. I want to remind everybody that Putin is a KGB man, and he is making sure that the whole Russian Federation is thinking in the terms that are clear to him through KGB prism. And I think the latest poll that was done by Levada Center just proves this, where according to this latest poll, they have Stalin as the greatest man who has ever lived. Lenin, I think Putin comes second, Lenin comes fourth, and Einstein comes 16th after even after Brezhnev. And just think about it. It means that that the world is totally different in the eyes of Russian society today. And when we are thinking about compromises with Russian Federation, we have to think about the compromises with a world where Einstein is inferior to Stalin, Lenin, Putin, and Brezhnev. And most importantly, it doesn't make sense for Kremlin today to see West as a friend. It sees West as an enemy, and it wants to roll back the time, before Gorbachev, before Reagan, and to divide the world anew. We do know his vulnerabilities, and we know that he is not that strong, but he transforms West's weaknesses into Russia's strength, and that's how he tries to rule and divide the world. I think it's important to understand that he plays you, he plays us, and we do not play him in response. And there is one important thing that I would like to underline very much, that there is just zero, absolutely none of persuasion or explanation that would ever change this vision and this approach from Kremlin, that comes from Kremlin and that comes from Putin. And the war that is being conducted on the world from Kremlin, from Putin, is a hybrid war. And it's relatively cheap, and it's relatively bloodless besides Ukraine and Syria. But he doesn't matter about that. He doesn't care about that. And at the same time, it goes to the core of your civilization. Why bomb you if he can get to your heads? And here I have another question. Are the societies here aware of what's going on? Are the societies prepared to counteract? Are the societies even starting to counteract? I think no. And Ukraine is the only place in Europe and basically in the world where he is getting real resistance. And it matters for Putin, not because he wants Ukraine the most, but he's afraid that his plans in Ukraine can fail. And Ukraine's success can change Russian Federation. And it actually can make Russians doubt that Stalin or Putin or Lenin or Brezhnev have been the greatest men ever who lived on this world. Ukraine can break Putin. And that's why Putin is so adamant to break Ukraine. And that's why he will not stop this aggression on Ukraine. And he thinks he's putting this aggression against Ukraine in a very in a manner as a KGB person would do it, as covert and deceitful. He thinks that if he doesn't call it a war, nobody will see it and nobody will call it a war. He thinks that the world wants to be fooled. And he wants the whole world to believe that one of the Russian neighbors just imposed the war on itself and started to fight with itself inside of its own territory. And he messes with our minds, and to an extent he does, unfortunately, succeed. I want to point out some of the pitfalls of the Minsk process. It's important to remember there are two sides to this war. It's Ukraine and Putin, and not some fairy tale creatures, Ukraine and some fairy tale creatures. It's not Ukraine and some so-called republics that have been formed by Russian FSB. It's exactly us against Putin. And he is trying to pretend within the Minsk process that he's not there, that Russia is not part of the problem. And this is a fundamental lie. And no sustainable peace could be built on the lie. Russia wants to pretend that it is a peacekeeper, it is a peace broker. But you know, we all remember, I hope that you do recall this joke, that Russia's peacekeeping is about keeping a piece of that or a piece of that. So I hope that we all understand what we are up and against about. And obviously, Ukraine is very much keen to getting peace. And we are sincere when we are saying that we are going through with the Minsk process, that we are supporting the Minsk process, that we want to make sure that we are fulfilling the Minsk process, because this is the only chance for us to get peace. But it's not the peace of any kind. It's not the peace at the expense of our freedom, at the expense of our sovereignty. And in order to reach that, we have to do three major things. We have to stick to what we signed, we have to stay strong, and never, ever forget what we are standing up and against of it's the Russian KGB person. It is of crucial importance for the peace process of Minsk to go ahead after the security preconditions are fulfilled. And I'm sure that we will stop on this and we will probably discuss this in more detail. So, but this is just the basic things. Viable ceasefire, a sustainable ceasefire, durable ceasefire, withdrawal of weapons, withdrawal of regular Russian forces, exchange of hostages, and finally also stopping of the suffering of the civilians. And only after that, Ukraine will be able to go further, to continue its political responsibilities under the Minsk. But only unilateral steps from Ukraine will not make it work, because they cannot ensure durable peace. I'll try to round up. Russia wants all of you to believe that we Ukrainians are a fascist and failed state, and it's exactly revoked in corruption and not able to change. And yes, we do have a lot of problems. And yes, I as a deputy prime minister and I as a citizen, I'm very much unsatisfied with quite a lot of things. But we have to also agree that we are on the path where we are already succeeding. And we can name these numbers, and I'm sure that during this conference, we will refer to all these successes that after real breakdown, after real close situation to default. We are on the GDP growth. We are protecting our citizens. We are ensuring the growth of this society. And that means that Ukraine can become the economy and political powerhouse, not only for Europe, but the whole world. And it depends on us whether if we do not sacrifice Ukraine, then the whole world has more chances to become a win-win world and has more chances to be as successful as it has been over the 70 years when it was on the rise. And I hope that we'll take it from there and we can think in that direction how we can help Ukraine to overcome the difficulties and to be successful and to be powerful and to make sure that the other countries are also successful around it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ivana, thank you very much indeed.